So our next presenter is James Dello from Ripple Effect Group. He's here to talk about how to customize Confluence Cloud, or as you may know it, Confluence OnDemand. So James, here you go.
Thanks, Ryan. Okay. Good morning, everyone. So I'm James Dello from Ripple Effect Group. There's a bit of a hint in my first slide there. I'm based in Sydney, in Australia. Not just an excuse to show you a picture of the Harbour Bridge, though. If you look up in the sky, there are a few clouds, and you know, each cloud is unique. But I think the interesting thing with cloud-based services, cloud-based technology, is that actually we're not trying to build tools for uniqueness. We're trying to build tools for scalability, for mass consumption. So it's kind of a bit of a counter to the idea of uniqueness. The other issue I find with the cloud, and Confluence is a social collaboration tool, is that many of the cloud-based social collaboration tools are not always taken, I think, seriously by the business. They're seen as a tool that people want to use to engage staff, encourage conversation, but they often don't take them beyond that. But Confluence is a very different tool. And what I want to talk about this morning is really the idea that we can use Confluence in a very purposeful way. It's not about having a cloud tool that is just for chatter, for conversation, but also the idea that even though it's a cloud-based platform that's designed for mass deployment on demand instantly, we can actually use it in a way that is customizable to business needs. And that's really one of the focuses about what I want to talk about, is using Confluence Cloud in a way that's customized to business needs, and not worry about the fact that maybe it's a non-unique platform. So one of the things to cover off first of all is to do a bit of myth busting around Confluence Cloud. Now, it is a standardized platform, as I said. It's designed to be a cloud-based service, a cloud-based solution. So every time you spin up a Confluence Cloud instance, you don't want someone having to worry about special configuration options. It's sign up to use Confluence Cloud, wait a minute or so, and you're off and you're going. You've got a Confluence site up and running. There is certainly one constraint with Confluence Cloud, and really it's designed for a maximum of 2,000 users. So if you're in a company that has 10,000 users, Confluence Cloud isn't really going to suit you, although you could certainly use it as a proof of concept or a pilot platform and then migrate to Confluence Server. Having said that, though, one of the benefits of products, and Confluence Cloud is no different here, is the fact that you get frequent updates. For those of you who are in the keynote this morning, I'm sure you were, there's some fantastic new features coming in Confluence. If you are a Confluence Cloud customer, you're going to get those as soon as they become available. You're not going to have to wait for an admin to upgrade your server, your instance of Confluence. So, standardized platform has some constraints, but there's also a lot of benefits. And as I said, for me, the real key thing is, and the clients I work with, when they're looking at using Confluence Cloud, they're really focused on business outcomes. They're not worried about the fact that you can't customize under the hood every single option, every single feature within Confluence. They're actually trying to solve a business problem. Now, to that point, just a very quick case study. I'm working with a government agency, and they have the challenge of managing hundreds of projects with many different stakeholders. So we're talking maybe potentially eventually 150 different projects within this program. This program, though, won't last forever. Once the program is complete, this initiative will shut down. So they needed a solution, though, that could help them to manage that program. And certainly one of the other interesting factors about this particular program is that these external stakeholders, the projects, are actually geographically spread into many different areas. So if you can imagine the situation, it's a government agency, like any large corporate organisation. You've got a team of external people you need to collaborate with, 150 different projects going on at different times, different points in time. How could they actually collaborate more effectively? One of the other interesting things here is that what they didn't need was a project management tool, i.e. a detailed project management tool. They're running a series of programs. What this is about communication and collaboration. So what they were able to do with Confluence Cloud is actually get a site up and running that was externally accessible, and was externally accessible to staff when they were travelling around working on these different projects as well. So they didn't have to worry about trying to configure firewalls. They didn't have to worry about all those issues with VPN tokens. They just had a Confluence Cloud site up and running, and they could start communicating and collaborating with their stakeholders and using it when they were remote from the office. There's also an example there of how we use, and it's just a mock-up, but they're using it in very much the same way of using the page properties macro to generate what's, as I said, more of a milestone report rather than an actual detailed project management plan. And that's the level of communication and collaboration they wanted, not detailed project tasks and activity and resource planning. If we delve into this in more detail, what we're seeing is some loose pieces joined together in Confluence Cloud. So the first part is around using templates. So consistent layout for key content pages. We're able to create predefined navigation. So the external users aren't living and breathing inside Confluence every day. So we need to make it easy for them to find key information and tools and documents. And we could do that using templates. So we've got consistency across the different projects. We also use templates to drive the configuration of the reporting we're doing through that page properties macro as well. The other part of that then is the macros. We're using macros to allow us to reuse content in an efficient way. So again, you've got 150 different projects. They all need to access the same information. When that information changes, I don't want to have to go to 150 different spaces to update that information. So we're using macros to pull content in from a centralized space and then share that with users across the different projects. Again, we're using reporting macros, and we've also actually built some additional custom functionality as add-ons. And that might come as a bit of a surprise that you can actually customize Confluence Cloud. You can create your own add-ons, and we'll be looking at that as part of the presentation this morning. The final part that is also important is good, smart space design. You've kind of got to create spaces that help usability, helps navigation, and also allows us to have flexibility. Again, you know, like any project, different projects might be following a template, but little differences come up in the process of those projects. So good space design allows us to do that. So for me, there's actually three really important strengths of Confluence Cloud. One, as I've sort of really hinted at quite strongly, is the fact that it's actually already externally accessible. That may not seem revolutionary, but you know, over the years I've worked with companies where it's been a real struggle to allow external users access to a shared collaboration space. And Confluence Cloud allows you to do that instantly. The other strength here is this strong suite of default macros. The macros within Confluence Cloud are no different from what you get really out of the box with Confluence Server, that on-premise version of Confluence. What I find, and maybe you found in your experience, is that people actually don't leverage those macros fully, even in that default configuration. There's a lot we can do, and I've already talked about the page properties macro, for example. The other really good thing now is also that the marketplace, where you can find add-ons for your on-premise version of Confluence, is also growing in the cloud. We also had an interesting experience where we found an add-on that was compatible with Confluence Cloud, didn't do quite what we wanted for our client, but rather than reinventing the wheel, we actually engaged the developer behind the add-on to actually enhance it on our behalf. Those extra features are now available to everyone. We've met our business need, and our client, who's, remember, they're running a cloud version of Confluence. They're not running servers. They don't have developers and admins who are going to maintain it. They don't want to maintain add-ons either. So we've commissioned the functionality we need from that add-on, and that developer is going to maintain it for us as well. So those are three strengths of Confluence Cloud. Let's get now into this idea of purposeful collaboration. So as I said, this is about saying, you know, it's not about having a social collaboration tool where people are just going to talk, you know, share pictures of the office lolcats. They're actually going to do work. What a cloud-based solution like Confluence Cloud does is, you know, I was trying to think of a straightforward way of articulating this idea. And for me, it's about a shift away from this industrial era of IT. Now, that industrial era was really good at, you know, transactional processing, and there is a need for that. You know, when I'm moving money between bank accounts, I don't want it sort of running through a wiki type solution. I want to know that money moves from one account to another. So we do want transactional solutions. The problem is, though, for knowledge workers, is always been the exceptions to the rules, or the things that actually don't need such a heavy duty process behind them. You know, we just want to communicate, we just want to collaborate. And that's what a cloud-based solution like Confluence allows us to do, is to support those non-routine, those more lightweight communication and collaboration style use cases, rather than being heavily transaction orientated. And you know, one of the issues we've seen created over time is that when knowledge workers don't have access to those kinds of tools, they fall back on email, on spreadsheets. And from that, we have a whole bunch of problems around version control, access to information, and even awareness of what's going on. And back with my example client, Can you imagine 150 different projects and they were trying to run that on email? It would be a nightmare. They need a centralized platform where they can do that, but unless everyone can get to it, it's no point having it. So how do we design for purposeful collaboration in Confluence Cloud? So I've got three ideas here. One is you're breaking down silos by bringing internal and external users together. We're going to avoid complex workflows by using what I call social workflows. You can see in the screenshot there, you can approve a decision just in a comment. Do you always need to have a heavy-duty workflow? No. You don't need any special add-ons in Confluence Cloud. It knows who the users are. It's registered that I've approved that and at what time and what date. Everyone can see that. So sometimes we don't need these complex systems. The other important, and I think a real key difference for Confluence, is that we can use a combination of templates and macros, maybe add-ons as well later, to support repeatable business processes. So we can be efficient. So social workflow doesn't mean it's just completely ad hoc, random, not repeatable. We can make it repeatable using the features within Confluence. And by the way, just a pro tip from me and our company, Ripple Effect Group, we follow a user-centered design methodology. I've spoken in the past about the use of personas, for example, in determining what business and user requirements might be. And we think that's really important. It's not about me coming up with ideas on how to use Confluence. It's about sitting down, working with users to actually understand what their pain points are, what their processes are, and then coming up with solutions that use Confluence to meet those needs. The other really important difference with Confluence Cloud for creating these purposeful collaboration solutions is to think about permissions models. Now, this might sort of seem like really basic stuff, but actually, remember, you're dealing with an instance of Confluence that is publicly accessible. It's not sitting behind a firewall on a server just integrated with your Active Directory system. All the users are known to you and it's controlled because of that architecture. Your Confluence site is out there in the public internet. Now, that, I guess, can be a concern, but also I think it's a key strength. And what I've got here on this table is just 4 different usage scenarios that Confluence Cloud can support out of the box. But, as I said, the trick is you do need to think about your permissions design from the beginning. It can become very messy if you haven't thought through the usage scenarios you're going to want to support at some point in the lifetime of your Confluence Cloud site. So the first one there is kind of the real common, typical intranet deployment, which is that you've got all private content, no anonymous users. And certainly you can do that with Confluence Cloud. You just don't provide anonymous access. Things get a little bit more interesting though as we consider some other scenarios, like you might have some public content. That's okay. You can allow anonymous users in some spaces. As we iterate through these scenarios though, you may find that you want private content, you do want to support internal users and external users. So a really good tip here is don't start off by using that Confluence user's default permission group in your space permissions, because you're going to find you're going to have to go back later and change that. Okay? That permission group is going to give everyone basic access to Confluence, but don't use that as the basis for your space access. You want to divide your world up between internal and external users from the very beginning. The final usage scenario I have here is that you've got some public content plus you've got that internal and external user split. I guess here, the easy thing is if you're building on that basic internal-external permission model, is that all you have to do is then allow some anonymous access. You might be wondering, why would you want to do that? Well, the nice thing about this idea of having anonymous, internal and external users supported in Confluence Cloud is that rather than presenting users with a rather vanilla login box with no instructions, you can actually create a very nice welcome landing page. You can provide new users with information about how to sign up, where to seek help, why they will want to use your Confluence Cloud instance. So you've got that opportunity to engage with users before they've actually registered and started to use your Confluence Cloud site. Now, the final idea I want to run through is this idea of simple user macros. This is a really exciting development in Atlassian's cloud solutions, focusing on Confluence, obviously, in this session. But what we're able to do now through what's called the Atlassian Connect model is actually build our own add-ons. So this means that Confluence Cloud is no longer a solution where you go, oh, how can I customize this? I can't do what I need to do with it. Well, you actually can now do that through Atlassian Connect. And if you go to the marketplace and you install an add-on, they're effectively all using this framework now to add additional functionality to your Confluence Cloud instance. Now, what I want to talk about here is, because if maybe none of you here are developers, maybe you're more users of Confluence, and you might be thinking, oh, well, I'm not a developer, and do I want to be developing add-ons for Confluence Cloud? Well, what I want to try and do here is introduce you to the idea of really that it's quite simple to build simple user macros. Now, maybe you'll go on to do more advanced macros, and there are other sessions at the summit that will go into this in more detail. But just to give you a hint that I think anyone really can build very simple user macros for Confluence Cloud. So I'll take you through the process. Now, designing simple add-ons. We're going to use the Atlassian Connect framework. It's all online and documented if you want to go and read about this. And we're going to create what's called a static content macro. So this is really a piece of macro content that's just like as if you'd created a wiki page and used macros and added content. That's what we're doing. It's using that same idea. Now, and the way you do that is to literally draft what you want to create as a macro in Confluence, and you copy what's called the storage format. That's the underlying wiki code that Confluence is storing for you. And there's if you have the administrator rights, under Tools, you can view the storage format. And you literally copy and paste that into the code you're going to host for your add-on. Really needs minimal configuration. These macros only need read access, so you don't have to worry about security configuration or anything like that. A storage format macro, this static content macro, can only do what you as a user could do as if you were typing this content into a page. So there's really no risk here. Each add-on can have multiple macros, so once you create this basic configuration, you can create as many static content macros as you want. The other really cool thing is, these can be deployed as private add-ons. They're just for you. You don't have to share them on the marketplace for other people. So you can create exactly what you want for your instance of Confluence Cloud and just use them with your site and not anyone else. So that's the storage format there. The actual process for hosting your add-on, it does need to be hosted outside of Confluence. There are a couple of things you need to just keep in mind. The hosting service you use must support HTTPS. You can't deploy your add-on through the marketplace otherwise. But the good news is you don't need a custom domain. So there's no need to register anything because your users are never going to see the URL for where your add-on is being hosted. That's all taken care of through the normal macro mechanism. So an example there is to use Firebase. Mention Firebase because there is a presentation tomorrow afternoon, I think, about Firebase hosting. You just literally need to upload at least 3 files. The configuration file, the icon, a little image to go with your macro, and you can use the same icon for all your macros you might create, and the text file that has the storage format code that we've copied from the template we created in Confluence. And you literally put that into a text file. You take those 3 files, you upload them to your hosting, you go into the marketplace, create your private add-on, and that's it. You have created a custom add-on for Confluence Cloud that you can use. Certainly you can do more complex add-ons through the same process. We're not going to cover those this morning. But just to give you an example of then what might you do with a static content macro like that, how might it help you? Well, this is a very simple homepage template I've created for the summit. And imagine we wanted to create multiple spaces for people to share content from the summit, but we wanted a consistent homepage. So rather than sort of just creating those and copying them, we can create a macro. One of the benefits of that is maybe the Atlassian Summit logo changes. So again, we don't have to go through all those spaces. We can change that logo in one place, and that will then cascade to all the spaces where you're using your macro. We can also if we're smart, use labels to create dynamic content. So it's not about having a static content macro where every space looks the same. This is actually going to be different in each space. So now we've created that, we've uploaded it to our hosting. Once it's installed, you just use it. So that's my macro there. You just go to the macro browser. You look for your macro. You insert it like any other macro and save the page. And what you get from that is something like this. So what you can see here is we've got our, this is for the collaboration teams home. So for this track, this session. And it says this space is for discussing the collaboration teams track. That piece of text wasn't configured in our macro. It's pulling it from a page, actually called the About page. We're using an include content macro to pull that in from the content in that space. That's different from using the include page macro another way of doing this might be to use that macro instead. But the trouble with the include page macro is it's in context of where it comes from. This macro, because it's integrated into your page, is pulling content from the context of the space you're in. So we can pull in these descriptions. We can also look, for example, in the bottom right-hand corner, it's pulling in a blog post from that space. So we've actually got a dynamic template, but it created actually as a very non-dynamic piece of static content in terms of it being a macro. So with a bit of sort of, a bit of lateral thinking, you don't need to get really complicated with your user macros in Confluence Cloud. Just to summarize very quickly then, I think Confluence Cloud is much more flexible than you might think. You need to work closely with users to understand how to best apply Confluence Cloud attributes for purposeful collaboration. Don't just build stuff because it's cool. Go and talk to people. Set up your permissions and spaces to take advantage of the cloud. The idea that it's externally accessible. It's not like an on-premise version of Confluence. And simple static content macros are a starting point for new efficiencies and workflows. And I hope that you might be inspired to go away and have a go at building your own very simple user macros in Confluence Cloud, and maybe even do something more sophisticated later down the track. Thank you very much.